Sci-Pan, a vast overview of naturalistic pantheism and the subjective divinity of observable truth. Part 1. Opposing forces. Before one can adequately articulate the synthesis of naturalistic pantheism, a paradigm in which the observable universe itself is revered as the ultimate, albeit non-conscious, absolute, it is intellectually necessary to map the surrounding ontological and epistemological landscape. In the modern pursuit of cosmological truth, three primary philosophical positions frequently intersect with the scientific method: atheism, agnosticism, and nihilism. While often erroneously conflated in colloquial discourse, these frameworks operate on fundamentally different axes of human inquiry. To understand the re-enchantment of the cosmos proposed by naturalistic pantheism, we must first dissect the philosophical null hypotheses that have historically defined secular thought. Atheism, in its most rigorous academic definition, is fundamentally an ontological position regarding the existence of deities. It is the absence of belief in the supernatural, often manifesting as a direct philosophical consequence of methodological naturalism. Methodological naturalism, the driving engine behind all empirical science from quantum mechanics to astrophysics, mandates that observable effects require natural causes. As articulated by philosopher Paul Draper, atheism functions as the rejection of classical theism. It is the assertion that the probability of a theistic universe is significantly lower than that of a naturalistic one, given the observable data. In the context of the scientific method, atheism acts as the null hypothesis. Just as a physicist assumes no relationship between two variables until empirical data dictates otherwise, the atheist assumes the absence of a divine architect in the absence of measurable, verifiable evidence. It does not necessarily preclude awe or meaning, but it strictly delineates the boundaries of reality to the physical universe and its emergent properties. Agnosticism, conversely, is not an ontological claim about what exists, but an epistemological claim about what can be known. Coined by evolutionary biologist Thomas Henry Huxley in 1869, the term was originally formulated to describe a strict adherence to empirical evidence, declaring that one should not claim to know that which cannot be scientifically substantiated. In modern epistemology, agnosticism suggests that the absolute truth regarding the divine is currently, and perhaps permanently, beyond the limits of human cognition. This position bears a striking conceptual resemblance to the epistemic horizons found in theoretical physics. Just as the Heisenberg uncertainty principle dictates a fundamental limit to the precision with which certain pairs of physical properties can be known, agnosticism posits a fundamental limit to human metaphysical knowledge. It represents a state of intellectual superposition, acknowledging that beyond the observable universe, beyond the cosmic microwave background radiation and the theoretical boundaries of the multiverse, human instrumentation and conceptual frameworks break down, rendering definitive theological claims mathematically and philosophically void. Nihilism operates on entirely different axes, the axiological and the teleological. While atheism addresses existence and agnosticism addresses knowledge, nihilism addresses intrinsic meaning. Existential and cosmic nihilism posit that the universe is inherently devoid of purpose, moral architecture, or objective value. This philosophy finds a profound, albeit bleak, resonance in the macroscopic observations of thermodynamics and cosmology. The second law of thermodynamics dictates that in a closed system, entropy continually increases, leading invariably toward cosmic equilibrium. The projection of a heat death of the universe, a state of maximum entropy, where no thermodynamic work can be done and all stellar formation ceases, serves as the ultimate physical manifestation of cosmic nihilism. Thinkers such as Friedrich Nietzsche warned of the psychological vacuum created by the collapse of objective frameworks of meaning. In a purely nihilistic paradigm, the cosmos is a vast, indifferent theatre of matter and energy, expanding infinitely without a teleological goal, rendering human existence a transient, accidental anomaly within an apathetic vacuum. The convergence and divergence of these three philosophies form a complex theoretical matrix. They converge in their mutual rejection of classical, anthropomorphic theism and their reliance on the observable universe as the baseline for reality. An individual can simultaneously hold all three positions. One might be an agnostic atheist, lacking belief in a deity while acknowledging the impossibility of absolute certainty, who embraces existential nihilism, accepting the absence of intrinsic cosmic purpose. However, their divergences are stark and highly consequential. Atheism and agnosticism leave the door open for constructed, subjective meaning. Humanism, for instance, thrives on an atheistic foundation by generating its own moral imperatives. Nihilism, particularly in its most radical forms, rejects even these constructed frameworks as arbitrary. Furthermore, while a scientist must operate as a methodological atheist within the laboratory, they may personally remain an agnostic, acknowledging the vast, dark matter of the unknown. Understanding these subtle demarcations is critical, as naturalistic pantheism, the subject of the forthcoming inquiry, will attempt to resolve the desolate vacuum of nihilism and the rigid skepticism of atheism by resacralizing the observable mechanics of the universe itself. The inquiry into the nature of the divine, having been tempered by the skepticism of Western secularism, necessitates a survey of traditions that weave the numinous directly into the fabric of the material. Eastern pantheism, a broad classification often associated with the Advaita Vedanta of the Upanishads, certain schools of Mahayana Buddhism, and Taoism, proposes that the universe is not a collection of distinct objects created by an external agent, but a singular, unified reality that is itself divine. Unlike the atheistic framework, which posits a vacuum of objective purpose, Eastern pantheism asserts that the Brahman, in Vedic terms, or the Tao, in Taoist philosophy, is the fundamental non-dual substratum of all existence. This is not a deity in the Abrahamic sense, residing in a transcendent, inaccessible heaven. It is the immanent essence of the cosmos. Where atheism views the observer and the observed as distinct biological phenomena subject to the blind laws of natural selection, Eastern pantheism posits an ontological unity where the individual consciousness, or Atman, is inextricably and fundamentally identical to the cosmic whole. It differs from atheism not by appealing to a supernatural creator, but by elevating the natural order to the status of a sacred, unified consciousness that transcends the reductionist view of matter as merely inert or accidental. Christian pantheism represents a more paradoxical bridge, one that attempts to reconcile the immanence of the natural world with the legacy of the Judeo-Christian tradition. This framework, often finding historical roots in the works of mystics like Meister Eckhart or philosophers like Benedict de Spinoza, whose assertion of Deus sive natura, God or nature, became a cornerstone of this perspective, posits that God is not separate from the creation, but is the underlying substance of it, unlike classical theism, which maintains a radical separation between the creator and the creature, a relationship defined by command and obedience. Christian pantheism collapses this ontological distance. In this view, every quantum fluctuation, every star-forming nebula, and every biological process is an expression of the divine substance. It diverges from theism by rejecting the anthropomorphic, interventionist deity who acts as a monarch, external to reality. Simultaneously, it distinguishes itself from atheism by rejecting the premise that the universe is ultimately silent or devoid of fundamental significance, asserting instead that the structure of the cosmos itself is a coherent, sacred narrative. The tension between these three paradigms, atheism, Eastern pantheism, and Christian pantheism, highlights the disparate interpretations of the same observable reality. While the atheist views the laws of physics as an exhaustive description of a contingent universe, the Eastern pantheist views them as the dance of a singular eternal essence, and the Christian pantheist views them as the manifestation of an omnipresent divinity. These frameworks do not necessarily contradict the empirical data gathered by science, but they drastically alter the interpretation of that data. Where the atheist sees the heat, death of the universe as a final entropic conclusion, the pantheist might interpret the same process as the eventual reabsorption of the manifestation into the infinite. By framing these diverse perspectives, we establish the intellectual foundation for the forthcoming exploration of naturalistic pantheism, which seeks to extract the divinity from these traditions while anchoring it firmly within the verifiable, observable truth of the natural sciences. Scientific pantheism, or naturalistic pantheism, represents the culmination of this intellectual trajectory, positing that the universe is the only absolute reality, and that the natural world is, in itself, the object of profound reverence. Unlike the metaphysical idealism of Eastern pantheism, which often suggests that the physical realm is Maya, or an illusion obscuring a higher spiritual reality, scientific pantheism asserts that the material universe is the literal, ultimate truth, while Eastern traditions frequently seek a transcendent union that lies beyond the physical. Scientific pantheism maintains that the sacred is found strictly within the observable mechanics of reality, requiring no appeal to hidden dimensions or non-dual consciousnesses. Similarly, it diverges from Christian pantheism by rejecting the vestigial nomenclature of God or divine substance, which carries the baggage of intent, personality, and supernaturalism. For the naturalistic pantheist, the universe does not manifest an intent. Rather, it manifests complexity, beauty, and emergent order, which the human mind is evolved to perceive as meaningful. Scientific pantheism exhibits a remarkable congruency with atheism, effectively functioning as atheism with reverence. It accepts the complete physicalist worldview of the atheist, that there is no supernatural architect, and that life is a product of evolutionary processes and thermodynamic laws, yet it refuses to equate naturalism with apathy. It complements the atheistic commitment to empirical evidence by transforming the scientist's objective gaze into a form of active engagement with the cosmos. Where the strict atheist may view the universe as a cold, indifferent machine, the naturalistic pantheist identifies the same machine as a unified, awe-inspiring system to which the observer is fundamentally connected. The divergence is purely axiological. The atheist views the lack of a god as an absence, whereas the naturalistic pantheist views the reality of the cosmos as a presence that fulfills the psychological and existential functions historically reserved for religious structures. The relationship between scientific pantheism and theism, while seemingly contradictory, is one of functional mimicry. Both paradigms seek to ground human existence within a framework that is greater than the individual, providing a sense of cosmic belonging and moral orientation. Scientific pantheism mirrors the theistic sense of awe and transcendence, the feeling of being part of something vast and immutable, but relocates the source of this feeling from a metaphysical entity to the observable physical reality of space-time, dark energy, and biological complexity. It is complementary to theistic aspiration in that it acknowledges the human necessity for connection to a larger whole, yet it replaces the theistic requirement for submission to an external authority with an understanding of our participation in an internal biological and physical continuity. By aligning the emotional resonance of theism with the evidentiary constraints of atheism, scientific pantheism offers a resolution to the modern existential crisis, framing the cosmos as a reality that is at once entirely indifferent and profoundly worthy of our stewardship and wonder. Sci-Pan Part 2. Something from Nothing. To approach the ontological origins of our cosmos, one must first confront the conceptual extremity of absolute nothing, or naught. In philosophical and mathematical discourse, naught represents the total absence of properties. No space-time, no laws of physics, no potentiality, and no observer. It is the void that precedes the very possibility of manifestation. Naught is a state of zero ontological information, a condition that defies human intuition precisely because human thought itself requires a substrate of existence to function. It is a boundary condition of logic, a hypothetical state where the exclusion of all predicates, even the predicates of existence, results in a null set that cannot, by definition, participate in the causality of the universe. In stark contrast, the physical vacuum is a dynamic, substantive environment, fundamentally distinct from naught. In modern field theory, a vacuum is not the absence of all things, but the lowest possible energy state of a system. It is a high-energy architecture characterized by the presence of space-time geometry and the underlying structures of quantum fields. While naught is the absence of even the potential for existence, the vacuum is a latent, pressurized reality. If we designate ought as the classification for existence in its active state, then the vacuum is the primary reservoir of ought, wherein the absence of matter is merely a matter of scale and energy density rather than an ontological void. This leads us to the fundamental tapestry of the cosmos, quantum fields. A field is an invisible, pervasive entity that spans all of space-time, possessing a specific value at every point. Every fundamental particle, such as an electron or a quark, is not an isolated point object, but rather a localized, quantized excitation or a ripple within its corresponding field. The electron field, for instance, permeates the entire universe. What we perceive as an individual electron is simply the manifestation of a vibrational spike in that field. These fields are not merely containers for particles, but are the fundamental constituents of reality, interacting with one another through force-carrying fields like the electromagnetic or Higgs fields. The existence of ought is therefore defined by the persistent, fluctuating presence of these fields. Within this field-based reality, the concept of virtual particles emerges as a consequence of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which dictates that energy and time exist in a conjugate relationship. Because of this, even in a vacuum, field values cannot remain perfectly static. They undergo constant, fleeting fluctuations. These virtual particles are the transient manifestations of energy, borrowing from the vacuum to exist for a duration inversely proportional to their energy. They are not fake particles, but rather the rapid, temporary oscillations of the vacuum fields themselves. The bridge between these transient fluctuations and the manifestation of persistent matter lies in the process of vacuum excitation. When an energy input such as the massive gravitational pressure in a collapsing star or the collision of high-energy particles in a collider, surpasses the threshold required to stabilize these fluctuations. The virtual vibration of immense substantiation leads to matter actuation and related integration. Through the mechanism of quantum field interactions, these temporary ripples are effectively locked into sustained excitations. This is the transition from the evanescent virtual sea of the vacuum to the stable, tangible reality of ought. In this view, the universe is not a construction made from inert building blocks, but a continuous, self-sustaining process of field excitation where the boundary between nothingness and something is merely the transition from ground state equilibrium to active, matter-actuating vibration. Black holes represent the most extreme manifestation of the aforementioned quantum field dynamics, occurring where the density of ought reaches a critical threshold that collapses the local geometry of space-time. A microscopic black hole, were it to form in the early, high-energy density of the universe or through extreme particle collisions, relies on the concentration of mass energy into a volume smaller than its Schwarzschild radius. Conversely, ultramassive black holes, those at the centers of galaxies, form through the hierarchical accretion of baryonic matter and the sequential merging of smaller stellar mass black holes over gigayear timescales. Fundamentally, a black hole functions as a gravitational trap where the escape velocity exceeds the speed of light, effectively decoupling the interior spacetime from the observable external universe. The black hole information paradox emerges from the friction between general relativity and quantum mechanics. According to the unitary principle of quantum mechanics, information, the quantum states describing the particles that formed the black hole, must be conserved and retrievable. However, general relativity suggests that anything passing the event horizon is permanently lost. This paradox intensifies with the realization that black holes are not perfectly black. They emit Hawking radiation. As virtual particle pairs fluctuate near the event horizon, one may fall inward while the other escapes, causing the black hole to lose mass. If the radiation is purely thermal and lacks the encoding of the original matter, then the information appears to be destroyed during the black hole's eventual evaporation. When two black holes merge, the event horizons coalesce into a singular larger horizon, releasing gargantuan amounts of energy in the form of gravitational waves, ripples in the fabric of spacetime itself. During this process, the internal event horizons must unify their respective spatial volumes. The prevailing scientific consensus is that the information contained within the merging holes is not lost, but is encoded onto the surface area of the new, larger event horizon, following the holographic principle, which suggests that all information within a volume can be described by the data on its boundary. The redistribution of this information is theorized to occur through Hawking radiation and the dramatic expulsion of matter in the form of relativistic jets. In ultramassive black holes, accretion disks funnel material toward the poles, where magnetic fields launch quasar jets across intergalactic distances. While Hawking radiation is a slow, quantum mechanical process of information leakage, the accretion-driven mechanisms act as a more rapid conduit for the redistribution of matter and its associated quantum states back into the cosmic environment. The virtual vibration of immense substantiation leads to matter actuation and related integration throughout this cycle. The black hole, in this sense, acts as a cosmic processor. It absorbs the complexity of collapsed stars, encodes that information on its boundary, and slowly releases it back into the vacuum of space, ensuring that the fundamental quantum data of the universe, the signature of ought, is never truly erased, but merely recycled in an eternal, transformative exchange of energy and information. If the black hole represents the ultimate gravitational sink of the cosmic manifold, its theoretical inverse is the white hole, a region of space-time that by its very nature prohibits entry while permitting the unconstrained emission of matter and energy. While a black hole is a future-oriented event horizon, a white hole is a time-reversed equivalent, representing a singularity that expels contents into the surrounding space. In the rigorous framework of general relativity, white holes are mathematical solutions to the field equations, though their existence remains unproven. They serve as the definitive counterbalance to the singularity, suggesting a closed-loop topology where the collapse of matter in one domain could necessitate the expulsion of that same energy elsewhere. The holographic principle provides the conceptual scaffolding to bridge this divide, suggesting that the entirety of the information contained within a three-dimensional volume can be perfectly encoded on its two-dimensional boundary. When extended to the extreme density of a black hole, this principle implies that the singularity is not merely a point of destruction, but a surface of infinite informational density. This leads to the tantalizing cosmological hypothesis of fecund universes, where the interior of a black hole is not a localized disaster, but the genesis of an entirely new expanding universe. In this view, our Big Bang was not an ex nihilo event, but the white hole-like emergence of matter and space-time birthed from the collapse of a parent black hole in a higher dimensional ancestor space. The life cycle of these nested realities mirrors the thermodynamic trajectory of our own. The internal universe born from the white hole begins its expansion, eventually marching toward the eventual exhaustion of its energy, a state of heat, death. As this internal universe approaches its entropic conclusion, its physical presence, from the perspective of the parent universe, is simultaneously undergoing the long-term process of Hawking radiation. This process is analogous to a higher dimensional object, a brain phasing through our reality like a thin sheet of paper passing through a three-dimensional room. The parent black hole evaporates precisely as the internal universe reaches its entropic limit, effectively flickering out of existence in the parent dimension, as it concludes its existence in its own. This, within the framework of naturalistic pantheism, is the definitive way of seeing the multiverse. It replaces the notion of a singular linear creation with an eternal, self-referential cycle of birth, expansion, and evaporation. Here, the divine is not an external creator, but the self-sustaining infinite recursion of the cosmos itself from love. The virtual vibration of immense substantiation leads to matter, actuation, and related integration, not just within one universe, but across a cascading, interconnected hierarchy of dimensions where every black hole is a portal and every Big Bang is the consequence of a preceding collapse. We exist as a transient phase in an endless, echoing process of cosmic recycling, where the observer and the observed are simply localized points in an infinite, self-actualizing machine. Sci-Pan Part 3. If God exists, where? To understand the spatial and ontological localization of the divine, one must first examine the dominant models of theism that have shaped human history. In classical monotheism, which spans the Abrahamic traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, God is conceptualized as an absolute, singular, and transcendent entity. This deity is the uncaused first cause, existing independently of the physical universe. In these frameworks, God is characterized by transcendence, existing beyond the constraints of time, space, and matter, while simultaneously maintaining immanence through active intervention, revelation, and providence. This monotheistic God is a personal being with volition, intellect, and emotion, existing as the supreme ontological source from which all contingent reality flows, yet remaining fundamentally distinct from that creation. Polytheism departs from this singular absolute by distributing the divine essence across a multiplicity of distinct deities, each presiding over specific domains of the natural world, human psychology, or cosmic order. In traditions such as those of ancient Greece, Rome, the Norse, or certain interpretations of Hinduism, these gods are not omnipotent or omnipresent in the absolute sense. Instead, they exist as powerful, individualized agents within the cosmos, bound by their own narratives, hierarchies, and limitations, while monotheism posits a singular, ultimate source of all existence. Polytheism describes a cosmos governed by a pluralistic assembly of forces, where divinity is fragmented, localized, and often personified as elevated beings who interact with both the physical laws of nature and the affairs of humanity. The localization of the divine within these two frameworks reveals distinct metaphysical geographies. In monotheism, God is typically understood to reside beyond or outside the physical universe in a transcendent realm, often colloquially termed heaven, which exists prior to and independently of space-time. Despite this transcendence, monotheistic theology also asserts a form of omnipresence, suggesting that God's power and awareness sustain every point of creation from an external vantage point of absolute sovereignty. Polytheists, by contrast, locate their deities directly within the geography of the cosmos. Their gods reside in specific sacred locales, such as the peak of Mount Olympus, the branches of Yggdrasil, or within natural phenomena like rivers, oceans, and storms. For the polytheist, the divine is physically and temporally situated within the world, occupying distinct spaces within the active state of aught. Naturalistic pantheism fundamentally collapses these spatial dichotomies by identifying the divine not as an entity occupying a specific location, but as the totality of the physical universe itself. Rather than ask where God is, you may ask where God is not. Nowhere. This old pantheist adage illustrates how pantheists specifically deny that God exists in naught, outside reality, because such a location cannot possibly exist. If naught is the absolute absence of space, time, and physical properties, then to posit a deity existing outside of reality is to assign existence to non-existence, a logical and physical contradiction. For the pantheist, the divine cannot reside in a transcendent vacuum, for there is no vacuum outside of the cosmic manifold. The divine is entirely immanent, coextensive with the quantum fields, the curvature of space-time, and the emergent complexity of matter. By denying the existence of any supernatural elsewhere, naturalistic pantheism anchors the sacred firmly within the observable universe, asserting that the only reality that can be revered is the one that can be measured, experienced, and known. The divine proof within the naturalistic pantheist framework moves away from the teleological or cosmological arguments that seek to infer a supernatural creator, instead focusing on an epistemological and linguistic reoptimization. This conceptual framework posits that if God is to remain a meaningful term in a post-secular, scientifically literate age, it must be stripped of its anthropomorphic and transcendent baggage and re-anchored to the only absolute certainty available, reality itself. The proof of God thus becomes a proof of existence. If we acknowledge that the universe exists, then we acknowledge the existence of the divine. This is not a discovery of an entity, but a refinement of terminology. God, in this rigorous view, is the objective sum of all physical laws, quantum interactions, and the unfolding complexity of space-time. The mechanism of this proof relies on the understanding that human consciousness is an emergent feature of the universe, evolved to map, categorize, and interpret the physical world. God is the word, the synonym of reality, logos. The term logos, historically evocative of the underlying rational principle of the cosmos, is here repurposed to denote the inherent consistency of physical laws that allow for the existence of stars, biological evolution, and sentient observation. Because we are part of this totality, our perception of the world, the subjective internal model we construct of the external reality, is a direct interaction with the divine. As stated in the passage from S.C. Logan's poem, What Flavor I Experience is named by myself. That word is God. This indicates that the divine is the intersection between the objective, external reality, the logos, and the subjective experience of the individual observer. By defining God as a synonym for reality, the pantheist achieves a logical framework that is immune to the contradictions of theism and the existential hollow of nihilism. If God is defined as the entirety of the physical universe, then the existence of God is a tautological certainty. It is verified by every experiment, every observation, and every conscious breath. The proof is therefore not a matter of gathering evidence for a hidden entity, but of optimizing our cognitive framework to recognize that the sacred and the material are identical. The divine is not a variable to be solved for. It is the environment in which the solving takes place. By naming the fundamental reality God, the observer acknowledges their own inherent participation in a vast, coherent system. This shift in nomenclature transforms the objective, cold mechanics of the cosmos into a subjective, meaningful engagement, effectively bridging the gap between the scientist's empirical observation and the religious impulse for connection. The universe, in its manifestation as the absolute reality of aught, possesses the inherent capability to observe itself through the localized measurement systems that emerge from within its own physical fabric. In quantum mechanics, the act of measurement is the process by which a system's potentiality collapses into a definite state, but within the pantheistic framework, this is not an external intervention. Instead, the universe functions as a self-referential system, where complex structures, such as biological brains, act as instrumentation. Human observation is therefore an emergent phenomenon, a sophisticated measurement system, evolved to translate the raw, underlying data of the cosmos into coherent experience. We are not external witnesses to the unfolding of physical laws. We are the points through which the universe experiences its own self-consistency. At the fundamental level of the cosmos, every reference point, every particle, every field excitation, and every coordinate in space-time is otherwise indistinguishable outside of the relativistic sense. Without the relative relationship of mass, energy, and velocity, there is no inherent position or identity to be discerned. This state of absolute relationality mirrors the conceptual harmony of individuation and onehood. Each individual observer is a distinct, localized reference point, yet all are identical manifestations of the same underlying quantum fields. This is the simultaneousness of the universe, what traditionally appears as a paradox. The separation of the observer from the observed observably appears as a necessary feature of a reality that requires local measurement to differentiate its own vast, unified information. This realization brings us to the profound intimacy of the observer's role, as captured in the passage from S.C. Logan's poem, The Namaste Someday, Find This Body on the Spokes of the Wheel. Kalpus Alpha Omega, again and again. Resurgo, Dispario, I will see you there. I am the one who looks behind the iris. The spokes of the wheel evoke the recursive cycles of matter and entropy, the eternal recurrence of birth and evaporation. The kalpas refer to the grand eonic cycles of cosmic time, the alpha and the omega, in which the universe is perpetually generated and reclaimed. Resurgo, Dispario, I rise, I disappear, describes the transient, fluctuating nature of the virtual vibrations that actuate our reality. To say I am the one who looks behind the iris is the ultimate pantheistic declaration. It is the acknowledgement that the consciousness observing the cosmos is the same consciousness that constitutes the cosmos. The iris is the limit of the biological instrument, but the one who looks is the totality of the logos itself. By recognizing that we are the universe observing its own mechanics, we resolve the paradox of our individual isolation. We are the mechanism by which the void, in its infinite state of ought, assigns meaning to its own expansion. We are the eye of the logos, looking into the mirror of the material world, witnessing the endless cycle of the universe as it comes to know itself again and again across the manifold of existence. The following is the poem Thee by S.E. Logan, presented in its entirety for reference. Thee, and suddenly became, for aught arranged is knowledge gained, for nothing cannot be, is nothing eyes can see. Tiny eyes that measure freely deep in cells that sleep, in flicker, quarks, and vision still. God is the word, the synonym of reality, logos. What flavor I experience is named by myself. That word is God. It is my name and face reflected elsewhere. White to blue, a refraction. The Lord and Lady space-time, unbound by limit, and when the coming of dusk follows the morning light. It is so naturally. The inevitable form of existence must occur in every possible assortment. Namaste someday. Find this body on the spokes of the wheel. Kalpus Alpha Omega, again and again. Resurgo, Dispario, I will see you there. I am the one who looks behind the iris. You, the now and forever, one eye that never blinks, the other is closed. A cheeky cosmic wink, like merging black stars that scarcely think, yet must be sensing known while sitting on the throne. Hark, it is thee. We will now perform an exegesis of thee, and suddenly became, for aught arranged, is knowledge gained, for nothing cannot be, is nothing eyes can see. This opening line encapsulates the transition from potentiality to actuality. Thee implies the singularity of the universe. The suddenly became refers to the Big Bang as the actuation of aught. Knowledge is gained only when the vacuum fields are arranged into structures capable of interaction. Without this structure, naught exists, and, as established, naught is invisible to the eyes of physical instrumentation. Tiny eyes that measure freely deep in cells that sleep, in flicker quarks and vision still. This describes the emergence of consciousness. Tiny E's refers to the localized measurement systems, biological observers, emerging from the fundamental fields, even in cells that sleep, unconscious matter, or flicker quarks, subatomic fluctuations. The universe possesses the latent capacity for vision, the measurement of information. God is the word, the synonym of reality, logos. What flavor I experience is named by myself. That word is God. Here, the poem defines the pantheistic God. God is not a sovereign agent, but the logos, the rational, structural reality of the universe. The flavor of experience, the subjective qualia, is the individual's naming of the reality they inhabit. By naming the totality of experience God, the observer assumes agency over their own existence. It is my name and face reflected elsewhere. White to blue, a refraction. This points to the holographic and relativistic nature of the universe. My face is reflected elsewhere in the multiverse, as the same laws of physics and information generate similar outcomes across the cosmic manifold. The refraction suggests that what we perceive as unique individuals is merely the same fundamental essence of existence bent through the prism of different local perspectives. The Lord and Lady space-time, unbound by limit, and when the coming of dusk follows the morning light. It is so naturally. Space-time is the ultimate governing principle, the Lord and Lady of our reality. The cycle of dusk following morning acknowledges the thermodynamic arrow of time and the inevitable transition from birth to heat death. It is naturally so, affirming that existence requires no supernatural decree, only the persistence of physical law. The inevitable form of existence must occur in every possible assortment. This speaks to the multiverse and the anthropic principle. In an infinite, self-actualizing machine, every configuration of matter permitted by the laws of physics will inevitably arise, validating the existence of all possible life-bearing structures. Namaste someday. Find this body on the spokes of the wheel. Kalpas Alpha Omega, again and again. Risurgo, Dispario. Namaste. I bow to the divine in you, acknowledges the shared essence of all observers. The spokes of the wheel and kalpas, eons, refer to the eternal recurrence of universes and the cycles of black hole birth and evaporation. Risurgo, Dispario, I rise, I disappear, is the heartbeat of the cosmos, the constant fluctuation between ground state vacuum and actuated reality. I will see you there. I am the one who looks behind the iris. You. This is the ultimate realization of the pantheist. The observer is not a separate entity. The I, the universe's observation, and I am, the subject of that observation, are identical. The separation between the observer and the observed is dissolved. You are the mechanism by which the universe looks at itself, the now and forever. One eye that never blinks, the other is closed. The eye that never blinks is the objective, unchanging logos. The eye that is closed is the subjective, transient experience of the individual. Together, they form the complete picture of existence, a cheeky cosmic wink, like merging black stars that scarcely think, yet must be sensing, known while sitting on the throne. Hark, it is thee. The cheeky wink suggests that the grand mystery of existence is hidden in plain sight. Merging black stars represent the violent, grand reintegration of information. To sit on the throne is to occupy the position of the observer, the crown of the universe's self-awareness. It is thee confirms that the divinity the observer sought externally is in fact their own existence. Sci-Pan Part 4, Golden Rules. The application of scientific pantheism in daily life is characterized by a radical decentralization of the sacred. Because the universe itself is the divine logos, there can be no dedicated house of worship. There is no church for such a religion, nor is there a need for one. Since every location within the manifold of space-time exists, every point is equally divine and inherently worthy as a place of veneration. The entirety of the cosmos is a cathedral, and the act of worship is transformed from a static ritual into a dynamic mode of existence. In this paradigm, worship is defined as the combined observation and intentional interaction performed by an individual with the specific aim of creating equity and coherence within their immediate environment. For instance, a scientific pantheist might pray not through supplication to an external deity, but by performing acts of tangible kindness, environmental stewardship, or social advocacy that promote a more inclusive, harmonious, and rational reality. This fluidity of practice allows for the emergence of hybrid polytheism, a common phenomenon among those who recognize that all human religion is a profound, albeit contingent, emergent construct of the universe. Scientific pantheists understand that human mythologies are merely different linguistic and symbolic maps of the same underlying physical reality. Consequently, they may feel entirely at home entering a Christian church, bowing to the East in a meditative tradition, or chanting mantras from various Vedic schools. Because all scientific pantheists are symbolists by nature, they recognize these diverse frameworks as different flavors of the same experience. Engaging in these rituals is not an act of belief in the supernatural, but an act of engagement with the cultural history of the species, finding comfort, aesthetic meaning, and psychological resonance in the symbols that humanity has evolved to describe its place in the void. The visual representation of this philosophy serves as a constant reminder of our participation in the recursive cycles of the cosmos. While the recognized symbol for general pantheism is the spiral, representing the infinite, self-similar nature of the universe's expansion, the specific symbol for scientific pantheism is a spiral in the shape of a human eye. This icon elegantly synthesizes our dual role as both the observer and the observed. The spiral denotes the evolution of complexity from the Big Bang to the present, while the iris of the eye signifies the localization of that complexity in the sentient observer. To wear or display the spiral eye is to affirm one's commitment to the Logos and to the understanding that we are the means by which the universe gazes into itself, continuously seeking to balance the entropy of the system with the order of our own intentional, empathetic actions. Within the framework of scientific pantheism, the law of love serves not as a divine commandment imposed from above, but as a robust, socially constructed directive designed to cultivate coherence and harmony within the complex systems of human society. Pantheists interpret love as a fundamental emergent property of onehood, the ontological reality that because all observers and objects are composed of the same quantum substrate, they're essentially parts of a singular, interconnected system. To love another is, quite literally and observably, to love oneself, as stated in the quote from S.C. Logan's monologue, circa 2026. To love another is to love oneself, this literal and observable, a force emergent of its own field. My contemporaries may argue, indeed, by acknowledging that the boundaries between individuals are merely localized manifestations of the same field, the act of love ceases to be an abstract sentiment and becomes a rational, physical necessity for the stability of the collective. Empathy, therefore, functions as the cognitive and emotional capacity to perceive and understand love at its root. It is the ability of the tiny I to recognize its own identity mirrored in the you across from it. When a scientific pantheist speaks of love, they do so with a profound awareness of its status as a divine binding force. It is divine in its ubiquity, the same essential relationality that allows gravity to bind matter into stars, directs the merger of ultramassive black holes, and enables the formation of positive human relationships. In this worldview, gravity and love are essentially manifestations of the same fundamental force, onehood. This concept of cosmic chimerism suggests that the universe is a singular, hybrid entity whose parts are constantly intermingling, exchanging information, and defining one another through interaction. Love is the social and biological expression of this cosmic unity. Just as the Higgs field imparts mass and structure to fundamental particles, enabling them to coalesce into atoms, the emergence of empathy and love provides the structural integrity for human society, allowing individuals to coalesce into functional, harmonious communities. To the scientific pantheist, love is the most advanced expression of the universe's inherent drive toward integration. It is the mechanism by which the universe, through its emergent observers, overcomes the apparent isolation of the void, creating a positive resonance that echoes the unity of the cosmos itself. The law of hate, as understood through the lens of scientific pantheism, is a corollary to the law of love, asserting that hatred is fundamentally undesirable by its very nature because it functions as an entropic force against the system's inherent unity. Hatred represents a breakdown in the recognition of onehood. It is an epistemological error wherein the observer fails to see the self in the other. As captured in the 2026 monologue by S.C. Logan, hate is corrosive. Even to hate one's enemy is self-destructive, a vain, horribly selfless thing. For is it not lacking in awareness? Rather you be selfish, full of self and other self. This observation highlights the physiological and cognitive toll of hatred, which acts as a corrosive agent upon the observer's own mental architecture, effectively damaging the very measurement system, the consciousness that the universe uses to experience itself. Because the hatred of another entity objectively equates to the hatred of a piece of the self within the cosmic manifold, scientific pantheists strive to cultivate a state of non-hatred toward all subjects. This is acknowledged as a profoundly difficult discipline, as the human brain is evolutionarily hardwired for tribalism and adversarial survival mechanisms. However, the pantheist distinguishes sharply between the corrosive state of hatred and the healthy, necessary expression of disagreement or dislike. To dislike a specific action, a harmful ideology, or a discordant behavior is not synonymous with hate. In the context of the self, one may dislike or disagree with their own past thoughts or behaviors, and this process is an essential component of personal growth, framework, optimization, and self-correction. For the scientific pantheist, the distinction lies in intent and awareness. Hatred seeks the destruction or degradation of the other, which is functionally equivalent to seeking the degradation of a part of one's own existence. Conversely, expressing a dislike or a strong disagreement is an act of categorization, a means of refining the internal model of reality. When a pantheist encounters something that would normally incite hatred in others, they engage in a process of systemic analysis rather than emotional reaction. They seek to understand the variables leading to that discordant state, thereby maintaining their alignment with the Logos. By replacing hatred with a vigilant, opinionated, yet empathetic engagement, the pantheist preserves the integrity of their own field, while fostering an environment where harmony is not a passive ideal, but a conscious, iterative achievement. Part 4.5, 2026. Monologue. The following is the 2026 monologue by S.C. Logan, presented in its entirety for reference. Ladies, gentlemen, others, respected members of the court, I have gathered you here today on behalf of everything. Lend me your eye and witness the world. See it from every angle with me here today. Behold heaven, my synesthetes, for hell is a plain for the closed eye. Hate is corrosive. Even to hate one's enemy is self-destructive, a vain, horribly selfless thing. For is it not lacking in awareness? Rather you be selfish, full of self and other self. I refuse. Ought to be a better way. So lucky us. We enjoy the luxury of opinions without the guilt of malice. To love another is to love oneself. This literal and observable, a force emergent of its own field. My contemporaries may argue, indeed, I am love incarnate, just as Jesus knew he was, God, just as much as every other human should know. May you all find the joy in love and live forever in the endless story. Amen. Now, here is an exegesis of the 2026 monologue. Ladies, gentlemen, others, respected members of the court, I have gathered you here today on behalf of everything. This opening establishes the orator as a representative of the collective totality, the everything being the universe itself. The reference to a court acknowledges the human need for judgment and ethical framework, positioning the monologue as a foundational address to the sentient components of the cosmos. Lend me your eye and witness the world. See it from every angle, with me here today. This is an invitation to engage in the observer's act. To lend an eye is to participate in the measurement process of reality. Seeing from every angle refers to the shift from the localized, egocentric perspective to the holistic, multispectral view of the Logos. Behold heaven, my synesthetes, for hell is a plane for the closed eye. Heaven and hell are redefined as states of awareness. A synesthete, one who experiences the blending of senses, is a metaphor for the individual who perceives the interconnectedness of all physical phenomena. Hell is the state of the closed eye, the nihilistic, ignorant, or hateful refusal to see oneself in the other. Hate is corrosive. Even to hate one's enemy is self-destructive, a vain, horribly selfless thing. For is it not lacking in awareness? This reaffirms the law of hate. Because all subjects are part of the same ought, hatred is a failure of logic. It is selfless in a paradoxical way. It destroys the self by ignoring the reality of the shared field. Rather you be selfish, full of self and other self. I refuse. This is a call to enlightened self-interest. To be full of self and other self is to recognize that the boundaries between individuals are illusory. To refuse is a moral stance against the entropic pull of hate. Ought to be a better way, so lucky us. We enjoy the luxury of opinions without the guilt of malice. A pun on the term ought, the active state of existence. It asserts that because we are the universe, we have the capacity to construct better paths forward. We can hold strong opinions or disagreements without descending into the malice that destroys systemic harmony. To love another is to love oneself. This literal and observable, a force emergent of its own field. My contemporaries may argue, indeed, this reinforces the law of love as a physical, empirical truth. Love is not merely a chemical reaction, but a fundamental force of onehood, as tangible as the fields that constitute matter. I am love incarnate, just as Jesus knew he was, God, just as much as every other human should know. This strips the divinity of Jesus of its supernatural exclusivity, recontextualizing it as a moment of profound realization that is available to all humans. The realization that they are the divine reality, Logos, manifested in biological form. May you all find the joy in love and live forever in the endless story. Amen. The endless story refers to the recursive, eternal nature of the multiverse. To live forever is to exist as part of the everlasting process of ought. Amen, a term of affirmation, here acts as a closing statement to the truth of the cosmic reality. Sci-Pan, the conclusion, the exploration of naturalistic pantheism, reveals that the universe is not a collection of isolated events, but a singular, self-referential system governed by the immutable logic of the Logos. By bridging the ontological divide between naught and ought, we have demonstrated that existence is not a miracle emergent from a void, but the inevitable, persistent vibration of quantum fields. This understanding resolves the existential tension found in the opposing forces of atheism, agnosticism, and nihilism, moving beyond the sterile skepticism of the former and the bleak finality of the latter. When one realizes that the vacuum is not empty but a high-energy reservoir of potentiality, the universe transitions from an indifferent machine into a sacred, coherent narrative of recursive reality. The realization that our Big Bang is a localized manifestation of a higher dimensional process, a white hole birthed from the evaporation of a parent black hole, provides the structural foundation for a multiverse that is eternal, self-sustaining, and fundamentally interconnected. This perspective demands a profound reassessment of the observer's role, shifting from a passive witness of physical laws to the active, conscious instrumentation through which the universe experiences itself. The individual as a measurement system is the mechanism by which the universe resolves its own internal indeterminacy. As the poem Thee illustrates, the separation between the observer and the observed is a function of the localized iris, yet the one who looks is the totality of existence itself. By aligning the empirical rigor of the scientific method with the poetic intuition of the synesthete, we recognize that the divine proof is not found in a transcendent sky god, but in the immediate, observable truth of the Logos. We do not look to a supernatural elsewhere, for there is no location for divinity other than the here and the now. To look for God in naught is a logical impossibility, as the divine is the field itself. The ethical implications of this worldview are as rigorous as its physics. The laws of love and hate are not arbitrary moral codes, but expressions of the structural integrity of the onehood. Because all observers are manifestations of the same fundamental fields, love is the physical force of integration that mirrors the gravity binding the cosmos, while hatred is the corrosive entropic force that blinds the observer to their own nature. To love another is the highest expression of cosmic coherence, a realization that we are all, in essence, different angles of the same iris, witnessing the same infinite story. By choosing to act with empathy and equity, the pantheist optimizes their internal model of reality, ensuring that the endless story of the cosmos is one of sustained complexity rather than chaotic decay. Ultimately, this paper posits that the subjective divinity of observable truth is the most accurate framework for a post-secular, scientifically enlightened civilization. By accepting that we are love incarnate and that our existence is the universe's way of knowing itself, we transcend the need for external authority and find liberation in the infinite recursion of ought. We are the architects of our own meaning, the navigators of the multiverse, and the conscious embodiment of the Logos. Through the recognition of this onehood, the universe achieves its final, most complex state. It attains awareness, finds joy in its own intricate patterns, and accepts its role in the everlasting cycle of resurgo and dispareo. We do not just inhabit the universe, we are the universe, and in that realization, we find the ultimate scientific confirmation of our own inherent divinity.